Oh, we're checking out something interesting, right? There is a message that an official Commodore employee leaked a few days ago, right? Because we haven't had any info about this in the developers note. However, I'm gonna quote it directly, right? I don't have any information about that. The only one I know is Lightning Emperor, which is coming soon. So, since there is no new unit announced after the collab in August, there's a very good chance the Lightning Emperor will be the one that they're working on, right? It will be the newest unit most likely. And what we're gonna do is, since this unit is already added into Summer's War Sky Arena, we're gonna check out their skills there, and we're gonna try to brainstorm what their skills could be in Chronicles, right? So let's go. Okay, and here we are. I'm gonna move my camera to the top so I don't cover any of the skills, right? Hopefully I don't cover any other information. I'm gonna start with the fire one, right? The fire lightning emperor Balager. So this guy was mostly a PvE unit, and he was like the main damage dealer in a content called Rift Raid or something like that, right? Basically very essential content where you farmed sort of these items where you have to upgrade runes. I mean, for Sky Arena players, you know all about it. For others, I'm gonna try to explain it a bit, right? Leader skills we of course don't have in Chronicles, right? So that doesn't matter for now. His abilities though, right? So all of these Lightning Emperors had a unique passive called Gain Knowledge, right? And you would be able to gain up to 5 stacks of this unremovable buff, right? And yeah, so not in Chronicles, in Sky Arena there were 2 main ways how you get this knowledge, right? The main one is getting beneficial effects on the Lightning Emperor, right? And some of them, not all of them, but some of them also could gain it if the enemy had beneficial effects on them, right? I think Fire one was not one of the ones that get these stacks based on the enemies getting them, right? This one gains 3 knowledge when an enemy is defeated, right? So there's like 2 types. One of them, like the water one, I believe the light one as well, get knowledge based on each buff that the enemy receives. The other 3, if I'm correct, get 3 extra knowledge based on every dead enemy. So like if you kill an enemy, you get 3 knowledge, right? Regardless of who killed it, I believe. And what would happen with this knowledge is the more knowledge they had, the more damage or the stronger their third skill effects would be, right? So for example, all of them had a maximum of 5 knowledge, and for this guy, once you have 5 knowledge, as you can see, his third skill got improved a lot, and essentially this is like a random hitting AoE ability, but it was super OP in stuff where there's like only one boss. So as you can see, yeah, 4 times the attack times 5, right? So that had like a 2000% multiplier or something like that, right? Even more damage through the skill ups. And yeah, so I speculate that if he gets a similar kit in Chronicles, he will most likely be something like an Argent, something like a Perna, right? The more knowledge you get, the more damage he does, and he will most likely be more PvE focused, maybe something to help with the raids, right? So essentially you stack the knowledge, which will most likely will be buffs, right? I don't see that changing too much. I think buffs is a fair assumption to make. And let's say if he gets 5 buffs, his other skill will be highly upgraded, right? Basic attack, I don't see it being too much different. Maybe he'll get a chance to steal effects, right? But I think like this will either be a passive or one of the skills, and this will be like a second skill. So yeah, the fire one, most likely not gonna be PvP, most likely gonna be very like PvE oriented. Okay, now the water one, Bulwark, I believe, right? Yes, it is. Bulwark. So this guy is like a very HP based unit, right? First skill, same thing pretty much. He got stacks differently than Balaga, right? So the first part always remains, right? They get one stack for each buff. However, the second part, this guy will get one knowledge for every beneficial effect that the enemy gets. So if the passive remains somewhat similar, there's a very, very good chance this will be a heavy counter to buffs, right? I can even see it being something like a basic attack, right? Like if you get 5 knowledge, they might have some sort of usage for this skill on the basic attack to maybe activate it more and shake up the meta a bit more, right? So that there's not as many buffs being played every game. So yeah, I can see the stacking being somewhat similar. Every buff that the enemy gets, you will get some stacks, right? And for the third skill, or the second skill for us, Forbidden Valor. So this skill is sick. In Sky Arena, it's used for both PvP and PvE in some cases, especially for Tower of Ascension, Hell mode, right? But what it does is for each stack that you have, it will decrease monster's HP by 10%, right? But if you have 5 stacks, it will decrease it by 50% of max HP, so not current HP. So let's say a unit has like 30% HP, right? If it had 4 stacks, it would only remove 40% of his current HP, which is like 24% of his... No, wait, less. 12% of his HP if he had 30, right? But if he had 5 stacks and he had 30% HP, he would actually remove 50% of max HP, which means he would drop to 1 HP and he would be a single shot away from death. So if a skill like that transfers over, this guy will be an insane counter to a lot of buffs teams, and not only defensively but also offensively, right? Because think about it, in a single skill you're decreasing 50% of their HP. This is like very commonly used with units like the Water Panda, who can also do fixed damage on top of that, right? The usual combo in Sky Arena was using this skill to lower the HP a bit, and then using the Water Panda to follow up into an insta-kill. So this could make units like a Water Panda very usable, and this will most likely be a very massive counter to a lot of buff teams, right? Okay, and the Wind one, Odin, right? So this guy is, his knowledge stacks the same as the Fire one, right? He gets 3 stacks for each enemy that dies, and he also gets 1 knowledge when you get like buffs on yourself, right? So this guy was very offensive, right? He actually had 2 passives, so this one is always a passive, of course, but his like third skill is also a passive, so he only had a basic attack, but that's all he needed personally. This guy is very strong as well, and his passive was, first of all, it is an auto revive, so very similar to Perna, the Fire Phoenix, right? Whenever he gets defeated, he will be revived, and the amount of HP he will have will depend on the amount of stacks he had, right? So for each stacks, he would have 20% HP, so at max stacks, he would revive with 100%, but the skill would go on cooldown and he would lose all of those stacks, right? So he was still very vulnerable when he had stacks. But if you do not kill him when he has stacks, for each stack he had, he would ignore 15% of defense, and at max stacks he would fully ignore the defense, as well as I believe he has an attribute advantage attack, yeah. So this guy, once you stacked 5, it was pretty much an insta-kill on any unit, as long as you were like manually controlling, right? If you were fighting it on defense, there were kind of good ways to counter it, just by abusing the AI, right? But yeah, if you manually control it, this guy has a good chance to be the sort of like a one-shot unit. Now, I know in Chronicles, ignore defense is heavily nerfed, right? They don't give you 100% defense reduction usually. I think the most they ever gave was like 60% on something like Katarina, I believe, or something else, right? Or maybe the Fire Frankenstein, like the Nat 3. So I don't think it will be 100% ignore defense, because if it is, this will quite literally one-shot anything. But this is probably the one out of like the 3 RGBs I'm the most excited about, because I do like these more offensive one-shot freestyle combos, right? And if this guy is able to ignore a substantial amount of defense with his attacks when he stacks that knowledge, that could be very, very interesting, especially as healing reduces as time goes on, right? Okay, and now for the light and dark ones, right? So light one I'm probably the least familiar with. Dark one I sort of know because it was also very heavily used in PvE leaderboards, which I liked, right? But this guy, first of all, knowledge stacking, it works the same as Bulwark. He gets 1 knowledge for every buff that the enemy receives, as well as every buff that he receives, right? And on top of that, so he also had a passive, and this guy was very, very defensive, right? This guy is all about healing, this guy is all about keeping your team alive, and he was mostly used in defense, especially defense where there is less amount of units than usual. So for example, not as much in arena and like live battle where there's 4 units, more so in siege or guild battle where there are 3 units, because the less units there are, the more effective his passive sort of becomes, because it uses up less stats, right? So every time someone gets damaged, for each knowledge that he has, he will heal them by 20%, right? However, if he had 5 knowledge, he will heal them by 50% of their max HP. So yes, there were ways to counter it. Something like heal block will obviously like hard counter this guy. But so yeah, if this unit were to come to Chronicles, honestly, this will probably be my most hated unit, right? The main reason is he's all about healing, and if any of you know, I hate these long fights. I hate these buff heavy, heal heavy teams. I want high damage, I want one shots, ignore defense, all of that, right? So yeah, potentially, if his passive works the same as in Sky Arena, where for every buff you get, he will gain a stack, and he will also heal every time you do damage. Think about it, like the only damage you can do will be damage without you buffing anything, right? So for example, Kina, you're not able to use any of his skills, right? If you want to kill this guy. I see this being a little bit difficult, right? Because a lot of units have a lot of buffs, right? Like even a lot of attackers, like let's say a random assassin I thought of, right? Katarina. She has like 3 buffs that she gets to herself, right? And each of those buffs will stack. Whenever you try to one-shot something, right? You go for the backline, you don't kill it. 10% left, boom, passive activates, he's back to full, right? So yeah, this guy is gonna be a healing machine if his passive works anything similar to how it works in Sky Arena. And yeah, I mean, if you like that playstyle, he's probably gonna be very strong, though I feel like he's gonna be stronger in content where there's like only 3 units, so like Arena, Brawl Arena, stuff like that, and less so in stuff where there's like 4 or more units, so for example guild siege and stuff like that, right? I think he's mostly gonna be the sort of like a defensive unit. You don't really want to bring him on offense much. Okay, maybe you do, like I'm just saying this because let's be real, this guy is boring. This guy is super boring, right? He's good, but he's super boring, and hey, if you like boring comps, go for it, right? But I don't see this guy being fun, but he's most likely gonna be very good, especially in those like situations where you need heavy healing. And now the dark one, Herteit, right? Herteit, yeah, that's the one. This guy was definitely the most unique one, and the one that I wanted the most because he was very good in PvE, especially the PvE content that I wanted. But yeah, so this guy worked in both PvE and PvP, right? He has the same knowledge passive as the wind and the fire ones, where you get 1 knowledge for buffs, and then you get 3 for each kill that happens on an enemy. Oh, it is saying an ally, so it might be your allies counting as well for the other ones. I forgot to mention that. But yeah, so you get 3 stacks for any death, and you get 1 for every buff, right? And this guy was all about this long, drawn out fights, right? So what would happen is, for each stack that he had, he would actually steal stats from an enemy, right? So you wouldn't do any damage with it, right? You would steal stats, and you could steal up to 10 times. I believe each steal, like with 5 stacks, each steal would count for 5, so you can only do it like 2 times on the same summoner. If I'm correct, do feel free to correct me on this one though. I wasn't too familiar how it worked, I just know like the general idea of how it worked. So what would happen is he would steal your stats, and the stats he steals is attack power and defense, right? Which means not only does his damage increase massively, the damage you receive will increase massively, and the worst part, his defense increases from that. So there's a few ways you could go around it, right? Like, if you want to gain more damage in that fight, you can target a specific unit that has a high attack, right? Which means that your whole team becomes tankier because that unit suddenly has like way less attack. And on top of that, you would be getting a massive boost to your damage, right? Or if you see that this guy is in a little bit of danger, right? What you could do is you could target a very tanky unit, especially a defense-based unit, if there was one, right? And you would steal that defense, making you much harder to kill, right? Because the defense, like if you build him low defense on like 1000, something like that, and he steals 50% of defense from like a 3000 defense unit, his tankiness just doubled, right? So yeah, this guy was very annoying. You could play it very well in offense. I think he wasn't as great in defense. It's more of like an offensive unit where you can actually control who you're stealing. And yeah, you get 5 stacks, and you can, with that a single leech, can pretty much disable a unit if that unit is like an attacker, especially an attack-based one, or a defense-based one, because you're stealing defense as well, right? So yeah, you could shut down damage units, or you could like keep stacking, and once you use that skill a few times, right, with 5 stacks, I mean, nothing survives. Like, imagine his attack power increasing like 3 times, 4 times. Like, the damage he emits, in a lot of cases, if you steal from the same unit 2 times with 5 stacks, the next attack is pretty much a one-shot, right? So yeah, this guy was very unique. He is a little bit difficult to use because he actually requires time to stack. So if anything like that occurs in Chronicles, I can see it being the same, right? Because we do get like 4 or 5 minutes for each fight. And yeah, if you can target that, I feel like if we were to get something similar to this, I think the summoner would be excluded from being targeted by this, because like, you can kill a unit and the opponent can still win, right? If you drop a single skill like this on a summoner, it's game over. Like, let's be real, it's game over. You will not be doing any damage, and because summoners have insane stats compared to monsters, you will also be losing a lot of stats. He will be gaining a lot of stats, and you will be much easier to kill, not only for him, but for pretty much all of you. Like, imagine losing 50% of the defense. That is essentially a level 1 defense break permanently on you. And you know how easy you are to kill once there is a defense break on you, right? Imagine that. And on top of that, you can also keep adding defense breaks from like your regular skills to make you even squishier. So yeah, if this guy were to come, I really hope the summoners are excluded, otherwise it's gonna be chaos. But I can see a similar skill to this being usable in some way or another, most likely on a second cooldown, because it will be a bit difficult to stack on him, right? You need a lot of buffs. It does not count buffs from the enemy, so you actually need to kill. And if you do have him on a team, plus buffers, right, like 1 or 2 buffers, you're sacrificing a lot of spots in your team which could be taken by damage dealers that will actually kill you. So unless you're going something with a Reviver, a strategy where like you let someone kill one of your units so he gets stacks and then revive that unit just to keep doing that, that could be an option, right? But otherwise it will be a little bit difficult to stack this if we were to get an unchanged version of this, right? So yeah, that's like a quick review of all of the 5. I say quick, that took like 20 minutes at least. Yeah, that's a normally long review of Lightning Emperors and what their skills could be based on other versions of Sky Arena, right? Let me know which one you would be the most excited about. Personally, I'm a bit of a PvE freak, so I would probably be mostly excited about the Fire and Dark ones, but I know if you're very interested in PvP, you'll most likely be excited about the other 3, right? But do let me know which one piqued your interest the most, right? And yeah, peace.